Now for Opera News on the Air, the radio edition of the Metropolitan Opera Guild's magazine, Opera News. Leading our discussion today is Norman dello Joio, American composer and Pulitzer Prize winner. Mr. dello Joio is also a faculty member of the Mannes College of Music in New York. As his guests, Mr. dello Joio has two famous interpreters of the leading roles in today's opera, Bidu Sayao and Jan Peerce. Miss Sayao, the brilliant Brazilian soprano, was a member of the Metropolitan Opera from 1936 to 1952 and is remembered as one of the most touching Violettas to appear on this stage. Her portrayals all had an indefinable quality of pathos and sparkle. Olin Downs described her Metropolitan debut in Massenet's Manon as a triumph in which the voice became the vehicle of dramatic expression. Manon's seriousness, sensuousness, her love of show, her fatal and adorable inconsistencies, all were there, projected with genuine sensibility. In all her roles, Susanna, Zerlina, Mimi, Melisande, Rosina, Norina in Don Pasquale, and so many others, Miss Sayao's portrayals were superb, interpreted with impeccable musicianship. Recently, the Brazilian government presented Miss Sayao with their Order of Merit decoration. It is the highest medal of that country, and only two other musicians have ever been so honored. Mr. Jan Peerce made his Metropolitan debut as Alfredo in today's opera and was an immediate success. A violinist before he became a singer, Mr. Peerce is also distinguished as a singing musician. Though American-born and American-trained, Mr. Peerce is a master of the Italian bel canto style of singing. It used to amuse me during Mr. Peerce's early Metropolitan years to have to convince our Italian listeners that the tenor was not born in Italy, but right here in New York City. It was the late Arturo Toscanini who gave Mr. Peerce his start toward musical stardom, appearing in the maestro's performances on 15 different occasions, including the memorable broadcast of Traviata. He was the first American singer invited to tour Russia after World War II, and last summer continued his role of goodwill ambassador in a concert tour of Japan, South Africa, and Israel. Well, now, Mr. dello Joio, introductions completed. Will you please take over? And by the way, Mr. dello Joio, happy birthday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cross. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Over 100 years ago, in 1852, the play Camille by Alexander Dumas the Younger was first produced. It was a favorite vehicle for those great ladies of the theater whose fame is now legendary, Sarah Bernhardt, Eleonora Duse, who, along with many others, brought the sufferings of Dumas' heroine vividly to life on the stages of every civilized country in the world. As recently as 1931, Eva Le Gallienne starred in a stunning New York production, and Greta Garbo's movie of Camille is considered a classic in its own medium. Nevertheless, the play is rarely performed these days. It has not survived the test of time from a literary point of view. Today, its chief claim to our interest is, I believe, as a period piece.
Well, that's easy enough to explain. The theme of the play could scarcely startle audiences today as it did 100 years ago. Bad girl with a heart of gold. But 100 years ago, a woman of easy virtue, even though worthy of respect and capable of heroic sacrifice, was not tolerated in society. Dumas made Camille for all the world to see, a lovely creature, completely deserving of our sympathy.
Yes, and Camille was the predecessor of many plays and novels on just such a similar theme.
Well, the theme is universal and has been so since the time of Adam and Eve. One reason, I believe, Verdi chose Dumas' story. Exactly a year after the play's premiere, the opera was performed. So it is 1 year younger, 106 years old.
Yeah.
And yet, the opera is not a period piece like the play. It is as popular all over the world this minute as almost any opera. And it is Verdi's music that thrills the listener over and over again, no matter how many times he has heard the opera.
Of course, that is true. But one must also be a dramatist. To be an operatic composer, he must also be a dramatist through his music. In this respect, Verdi was a master.
Yes. Now, a good example to begin with is the soprano's big aria in the first act. To many people, it's just another brilliant showpiece, but think of the meaning and the emotion in that aria. Violetta is a frivolous young lady who lives in an expensive house, has jewelry and beautiful gowns, all supplied by rich older men. And suddenly, at a party in her house, she meets a handsome young man who says he's been in love with her for a year. And how does she feel? She cannot believe it. She's almost afraid to believe it.
That one aria tells us all about Violetta. Her fears and hopes are spelled out. Longing for love, knowing that it can never belong in her way of life. Her thoughts give way to words, and the words inspire Verdi's music.
Her hopes and desire for love are sung in long legato lines, which are extremely sad. Violetta is giving up what she does not have, but wants so much.
We come now in this character-revealing aria to the second part, where Violetta has a sharp change of mood. As you said, Miss Sayao, many people maintain that the vocal display here serves little purpose beyond showing off a soprano's technique and agility. Some find this kind of coloratura singing artificial in the context of so emotional a situation.
I've never understood this attitude. I've never heard anyone deride or belittle the same pyrotechnic display when a pianist or violinist plays a cadenza. It is part of almost every concerto.
It depends on the singer, too, you know. If the soprano sings just the notes in this brilliant passage, as if it were a vocal exercise, it makes no sense.
You're so right, Miss Sayao. I've heard some pretty outrageous interpretations, and they're not confined to the coloratura category either. Her short phrase, improperly handled in a given scene, can ruin the interpretation, and today's opera is full of just such pitfalls for the singer.
And one is the second part of Violetta's aria, Mr. dello Joio. After she sings so sadly of the love she cannot have, she laughs at herself and her dreams.
Yes, she builds this up builds up this mood, and first, though, she makes a great effort to shake off her momentary reverie. Follia, follia, what folly is this? Love is not for me. I must be mad to think otherwise. And then comes the coloratura. I must be free, she says, to live a life of pleasure. I must be without a thought and forever gay. And her music is as abandoned as the mood that has come over her.
That kind of storytelling music is in every scene of traviata, not only in arias, as we have just illustrated, but in duets and ensembles too. There are passages, sometimes no longer than one measure, that are so meaningful. They describe musically a sudden change of emotion or mood. At other times, they're in the nature of a comment. What I'm trying to emphasize is the conversational quality of the music that Verdi has given his singers to sing.
An example of this is your aria that opens the second act, Mr. Peerce. It's not exactly in ordinary conversational tones, but it's a typical outburst of pure joy. The I'm so happy I could scream kind of thing.
Yeah, of course, we could use a high B flat at the end of this aria.
Well, here, you and Violetta are finally together and living ecstatically in your ivory tower away from the social whirl of Paris.
If you want to talk about the little phrases and comments that mean so much, there are wonderful examples in the second act duet. That sad visit between Alfredo's father, Germon, and Violetta.
They certainly have a lot to say to each other, and what an entrance old Jamont makes. The music, brief as it is, announcing his arrival, can only mean trouble. It tells you at once that he's a very austere old man.
His voice is... His voice is very frightening to Violetta. The way he says her name, you know his attitude at once. Mademoiselle Valérie, he will stand for no nonsense from this girl who he believes is ruining his son's life.
But he's also surprised to see such a pretty young girl. She doesn't look at all like the notorious Parisian courtesan he expects.
And like all men, Mr. Peerce, he changes his tune.
He does that, to be sure. But he doesn't yield an inch in his purpose. He just changes his approach. A gentleness takes the place of his belligerence. Jamont says, "You must give up my son or my family will be dishonored, and my daughter will not be able to marry and be happy."
But Violetta is thinking of her happiness and Alfredo's and try to explain how much she loves him. She is not very calm when she answers German. "I would rather die than give him up," she says. She is breathless with agitations. There a premonition of tragedy in her music.
It's a very emotional scene. Two strong-willed characters, each determined, each full of protestations, each trying to persuade the other to give in. But Jamont wins. Violetta's agitated staccato phrases of a moment ago melt into a long legato phrase which Verdi has marked con estremo dolore, with extreme anguish.
To me, the most heartbreaking phrase of all is when Violette asks Germont to understand her great sacrifice. Through her tears, she begs him to realize that she will love Alfredo till the day she dies.
And there's more. There's very much more to their duet. But at least we have an idea of how the music tells the story. After Jamont has gone and leaves Violetta to work out her problems, she decides to write a note to Alfredo and decides then to return to Paris without seeing him.
But Alfred comes back before she has time to get away, and the most difficult moment of all faces Violetta. She must say goodbye to Alfredo. She tries to be cold about it, but it is impossible. She is almost hysterical. "I will be near you," she says, "always and forever." And then the music changes to her final passionate goodbye. "Amami, Alfredo, amami quanti io t'amo. Addio. Love me as I love you."
After the heartbreaking climax of the second act, it is hard to believe that there is even more heartbreak for Violetta to endure. But there is in the third act. Personally, I find myself liking her best in this act because there Violetta makes the most difficult sacrifice of all, and makes it in the form of a disastrous lie. Violetta is very noble here.
To protect Alfredo and to keep her promise to his father, she tells the magnificent lie. Yes, I love to fall.
Well, I hate to admit that the tenor's reaction to her confession is despicable. After calling the guests back to the ballroom, he indulges in a violent tirade of insults and throws his card winnings at her feet. Now my debt is paid in full, he cries out. One page of music, but it's a good one. His despair and hate since Violetta left him is all there.
Violetta does not even try to defend herself. Everyone denounces Alfredo. Her voice soars over all the others. I will always love you, she says over and over again. But Alfredo does not hear.
Yes, Violetta's come a long way from the frivolous girl of the first act. No lie now, no sacrifice is too much for her if it will mean Alfredo's happiness.
Each act has its own tempo and mood. The last act is somber, but seeping through every measure of hopelessness and tragedy are the notes of irony. Germont has asked Violetta's pardon. She is free now to live happily ever after with Alfredo.
Violetta tries to be gay. She knows she's dying, but she says she will leave. It is fantastic how Verdi makes her music. And all the music in this act, gay and sad at the same time.
Yes, there's always that feeling of hope against hope. There are those three phrases, too, in the last act that are infinite in bitterness, brief and shattering each one, and each of a different kind of despair. You know, it doesn't sound possible, but Verdi makes it so. I'll never forget, Miss Sayao, how you put this despair and this hope in your voice. First, the illusion assuring Alfredo that Violetta will live. Look, Alfredo, she says, I'm not ill, I'm smiling, I'm strong.
I know the second phrase you're thinking of, Mr. dello Joio. When the pretense is gone and Violetta faces her inevitable death. To die so young, she says, I was delirious to hope.
But she's not ready to die, Mr. Peerce. The two emotions of hope and despair are together again. She is rebellious and angry, too. Ah, dunque, fu delirio la credula speranza. Invano di costanza armato avrò il mio cor.
And there is one more example of this hope-despair theme. It's the last phrase Violetta sings. After singing these words, Miss Sayao, you would fall to the floor so swiftly, so suddenly, and die on the word joy. I will return to life. I will live again. Oh, joy.
Cessarono gli spasimi del dolore. In me rinasce, m'agita insolito vigor. Ah, ma io ritorno a vivere. Oh, gioia.
Thank you, Mr. dello, Joio, Miss Sayao, and Mr. Peerce.